The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. And it is a biography, and we'll learn about that underneath genre. It's blue. A biography tells about events in a person's life. As you read, look for information about why a person is important and events in time order. We have read a biography before. Think about when we listened to and read the story or the biography about Helen Keller. And our essential question, something that we'll think about as we're reading and listening, is how can you learn about animals that lived long ago? The Dog That Dug for Dinosaurs. A long, long time ago, there was a little dog named Tray. He was black and white all over. He had friendly brown eyes and a very wiggly tail. Tray lived in England. Tray was a real dog, and this is an honestly true story about him. Tray loved two things most in the whole world. First, he loved Mary Anning. She was 12 years old and lived with her family in a small cottage near the beach in Lyme Regis. Secondly, Tray loved going with Mary to dig for fossils. So, what are fossils anyway? They are the remains of animals and plants that died a long time ago. When a leaf or bone gets pressed between layers of sea mud, it leaves an imprint. After many years, the mud hardens to rock. Have you ever seen a fossil before? Or found a fossil before? Tray and Mary knew that they would find the very best fossils high up on the cliffs around the beach. They climbed up there every day. Tray sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt. Scratch, scratch. Mary used a small hammer and chisel. Tap, tap, tap. With these tools, Mary carefully cut fossils out of the cliff, just as her father had shown her. Tray watched as she placed the fossils in her basket. Most of them looked like seashells. Mary and Tray sold them as souvenirs to the tourists that came by stagecoach to swim at the beach near their home. One day, Tray and Mary discovered some very large bones sticking out of the rocks. They were huge. Tray growled and tried to dig the bones out. Mary used her hands to brush away the loose dirt. "Tray, we've discovered a monster," she declared. The bones were much too big for Tray and Mary to remove by themselves. "I'll go for help," Mary said. "You stay here, Tray." Tray barked loudly and sat down in the front of the bones. He was a very good guard dog. Mary ran all the way back to town and asked some grown-ups to help her. "Tray and I have found something really special in the cliff," she told them. "Just wait and see." When the men saw the giant rib bones in the side of the cliff, they were amazed. "What a beast!" they cried. "Look at those sharp teeth." "Is it a crocodile?" one man asked. "Or a stubby whale?" "We don't know what it is," Mary admitted. "But we know it's something special, don't we, Tray?" Tray yipped and wagged his tail. A rich man who lived nearby heard about the sea monster. He hurried to see it for himself. "I'll buy it," he cried. "I will give it to the British Museum in London." "Do you know what it is?" Mary asked. "It's called an ichthyosaur," the man told her. "That means fish lizard," he explained. "It's like a dinosaur with fins." The amazing news spread about the gigantic fish lizard and the dog and little girl who had found it. Soon, many strangers came to Lyme Regis where Mary and Tray lived. They all wanted to hunt for fossils, too. The men wore tall top hats. The women wore frilly bonnets. They carried pretty umbrellas called parasols. Mary shook her head and smiled. She rubbed Tray's soft ears. They watched the strangers together. "They don't have the right tools," Mary whispered. "They are wearing the wrong kinds of shoes. Aren't they silly, Tray?" Tray yipped and chased his tail. Curious scientists visited Lyme Regis too. One man came from the university in Oxford. His name was William Buckland. He went to the old carpenter's shop where Mary and Trey sold their fossils. "Can you show me where you found your ichthyosaur, young lady?" he asked politely. "Do you think you could find the exact spot again?" "Trey can find it," Mary boasted. Together, Mary and Mr. Buckland followed the little dog across the beach and up to the cliffs. Mary sniffed the rocks. Sniff, sniff. He pawed the dirt. Scratch, scratch. Suddenly he yipped. Then he sat down. Mary pointed. It was the exact place where she had discovered the strange fish lizard. What an intelligent dog," Mr. Buckland declared. Trey wagged his tail. Trey and Mary continued to dig for fossils. They were very careful. Mary watched for falling rocks like her dad told her. Trey looked out for storms and high tides. Then, one day they discovered another giant creature. "Look, Trey," Mary cried. "Is it a sea dragon?" Trey sniffed the skeleton and snapped at it with his teeth. The creature had a long, long neck. Its backbone was like a humped turtle shell. Instead of feet and legs, it had 4 large paddles. But it wasn't a sea dragon. Mr. Buckland called it a plesiosaur. One day, Trey and Mary found a fossil that no one in England had ever found before. This one had huge, bony wings like a bat and a long, sharp jaw. Trey growled. "It looks like a giant flying lizard," Mary declared. The scientists thought so too, and that's why they named it a pterodactyl. That means lizard with wings. Over the years, Trey, Mary, and Mr. Buckland became good friends. They showed him where to find the best fossils in Lyme Regis. Mr. Buckland brought books about dinosaurs for Mary. He brought beef bones for Trey. Mary, with Trey on her lap, studied her books every day. When Trey's whiskers turned gray and Mary was all grown up, they still collected fossils and sold them in the old carpenter shop. There were boxes and baskets with fossils on the floor and on the shelves. Some of the fossil creatures were so big they couldn't fit through the door. Sometimes children and tourists stopped in to buy fossils of ancient sand dollars or tiny fish and curly shells. Many scientists came to the shop to buy fossils too. They brought carts and wagons to haul away the really large ones. Trey and Mary Anning became very famous. Today, if you go to the Natural History Museum in London, you can see the large fossils they discovered together. You can also see a famous painting of Mary holding her fossil bucket, and Trey the dog that dug for dinosaurs.